as Isabel's just said, I head up marketing actually for Porsche. So as I sort of, we're talking about luxury brands today, and I know that you've sort of had. Come in, no problem, just sit down. I know that you've probably had, I think it's sort of 8 or 9 sessions already, so apologies if you're either PowerPointed out or lectured out. We'll try and make this as painless as possible. But during this, these sessions really are for you. So if at any point, either during, while the presentation's going on, you want to ask a question or you don't understand something, I've obviously, you're all final year students, so I've taken a level of understanding, which I think you'll probably all have. But please do ask either during, or I'll be hanging around at the end if anybody wants to ask me anything specific as well. So as I said, it would be lovely to have some interaction during this, otherwise it might make for a fairly boring 20 minutes just listening to me. So if we start, so as I said, I have been asked to just go through a little bit about my background, so you can sort of get some credentials of why I'm standing here today talking to you about sort of marketing of premium and luxury brands. So I've got almost 20 years of experience covering some really broad marketing, comms and business development remit, and across B2B and B2C, so business to consumer and business to business. I actually started my career going back many years ago at Silverstone and then went into Formula One for 3 years. And during that time, I was sort of early 20s at that point, and you couldn't really ask for better. Come on in. You couldn't really ask for a better way to sort of start your career than around some really major profile and global brands. And I just really took that time working alongside those brands, the likes of Benson & Hedges, the likes of Orange, the likes of Red Bull, Puma, all those types of, to actually just really absorb everything I could about that. So great experience, one that I also don't miss, however, it's a very strange lifestyle. I then went into, it was still within motorsport, but actually went on to Two Wheels and worked for Petronas, so big Malaysian oil giant based out in Kuala Lumpur, heading up the commercial aspects of their World Superbike project with Carl Fogarty. I'm not sure who's recently watched I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, but yes, I worked with that gentleman for 5 years. To there I decided I'd had completely enough of engines, racetracks and a number of other things, and I went to work for World Vision to head up their marketing and comms. Very different, going into the third sector, an international NGO. And it's great, and that's the one thing I would say, it's been great to sort of practice my profession outside of comfort zone of some things where it might always be. So, a lot of people might stay within healthcare for their whole life or something else, but I've made sure I sort of mixed it up. And from there was tempted back to the world of automotive with Honda, where I stayed for 6 years, and now I head up, as I said, marketing for Porsche. And in between that time, I've had some consultancy roles covering sort of sport, music, British Forces, other automotive, aviation and similarly in the third sector. So hopefully that gives you some confidence that I might know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but at the same time, if anybody disagrees with anything, so happy to hear that as well, or would like to challenge anything. So I guess from starting where we are, it's about what is premium and what is luxury. So premium brands, I think it's an expression that people have heard an awful lot over the time. We've now got luxury brands as well. What is premium, what is luxury? You could argue it's subjective. It's partly based on perception. It's partly based on your background, it's partly based on your wealth, your affluence, and in your lifestyle and your experiences. So I think we can sort of fairly say that in the level of brands, you've sort of got things which are necessity at their fundamental level. You've then got basic. You've then got what is actually called quality, but I call the nice to haves. You've then got premium, and now you've got this level of luxury as well. So we're just going to look at 3 particular different industries, and it would be great to have your view on these things. So my 3 questions is, what does each of these mean to you that we're going to pull up in each sector? Which one do you consider to be the premium brand, and which one do you consider to be the luxury brand, and then why? So I guess if we look at, first of all, if we look at airlines. So I'm hoping, stroke assume there's nobody in this room that doesn't recognise all of those. So if I was to say to you, out of those, just if I was to say EasyJet, what's your perception? Low cost, okay. So your perception would be, if you were sort of looking at the necessity, basic, Nice to have, premium or luxury, where would it sit? Towards the bottom is sort of where I think I'm hearing, absolutely. So if we then talk about Emirates, so obviously a United Arab Emirates based airline, what does that mean to you? So more premium, okay? Virgin, British Airways? Nice to have, yeah. And again, there isn't necessarily in all of these a right or a wrong answer. It's perception at the end of the day. We know, however, that EasyJet and Ryanair are the low-cost airlines. We know that they're not really frills. You know that the service is going to be relatively basic, but it's kind of what you expect. So they're at least meeting your expectations, hopefully. Your expectations, I would imagine from just hearing the glimmers of what you've been saying, is that you're going to be expecting more if you're flying on British Airways or Emirates. And it's because they command that slightly higher price, that slightly higher premium. Virgin still, in that scope, depending on which service you go for, can be even further to that. So if you had to pick one of those, what of all of those would you say is the premium, and which would you consider the luxury brand? Emirates luxury, okay. British Airways premium. Yep, that's fair enough. So if we now look at fashion, again, same exercise for this. What do each of these mean to you? If you just pick one, so Primark, what does that mean to you? Okay, not sure what the titters are there, but Harrods, what does that one mean to you? Luxury, okay. But why? Throw some words out to me, which is why Harrods means to you luxury. Service? Cost? What about the cost? It's expensive, okay? Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, it's more niche, we've got lower volume. Exclusive, yeah. So all of those. So even in this room, you've got your perceptions already as to what's what. So if we now look at automotive, which is obviously something that I know very well, which of those is the necessity or the basic? Poor Ford. So in your perception though, because this could mean different things to different people, which is the premium, which is the luxury? Rolls-Royce luxury? Aston, okay? Okay, I think it's fair to say then, so in that, everybody's, pretty much coming up with the same elements here of where we're at. So in terms of what it is, we know where we're at. Again, Rolls-Royce would absolutely be considered luxury. For a number of people, so would Porsche and Aston. Given that things like Audi, for example, they used to be the premium brands. They used to be the absolute things to aspire to, the BMWs, the Mercedes. The proliferation of these super brands that have come out of more recent times are what's really now sort of pushing it into luxury. And in terms of luxury brands as well, they do tend to fall into particular sectors. So you'll have motor, and that could include cars, bikes, it also could include yachts, so things which have got motors, jewellery, property, beauty, fashion, beverages and leisure, and they will tend to fall into those categories. I think it's also important to say, bearing in mind that all of these largely have products, but a brand and a luxury brand could be a service, i.e. a hairdresser's, for example. If you went to Nicky Clark or Vidal Sassoon, it could be a shop. As we've said, it's Harrods. It's not necessarily a product or a service, but it is in itself. A luxury brand could be a location. So if we use Necker Island, Richard Branson's own island where you can go on holiday, it's a location. It could also be an attraction, an experience or an education. So all of those elements now, it's not just about a product anymore or a service. Any one of those things can be created into a luxury brand. I guess the question is how, and then how do you market it? So if we look at the characteristics of a luxury brand, I think a lot of you have sort of come out with them anyway. You've talked about higher price, you've talked about it being niche rather than volume in terms of quantities. But essentially, I think it can be broken down into two elements. And this is where luxury brands very much differ from mass and consumer brands or consumer durable brands, is that there is an absolute necessity that at their core, they have these four elements. And this isn't something that you can necessarily create. Persona may be slightly different, but they're just inherently and intrinsically there. So for example, if we look at performance, this is about innovation, it's about originality, it's about absolute excellence in doing what it's designed for, the first of its kind. And a good example of this would be Apple's iPad. You know, you can't question Apple's innovation. You can't question the fact that, you know, their performance of what they do and what is said is actually happens. So if we then look at pedigree, this is about the legacy and the history that you get. It really gives that brand credibility. You believe that you're buying into something which has got that heritage, that authenticity, that craftsmanship. And then this is reflected in the activities as well. So if we look at things like Hermes, you know, how many people normally in their right mind would spend £1,500 on a handbag? But you'll have those that do, partly because of this pedigree that it's got. Omega watches, there are a number of brands that are like this, so that's incredibly important, and so it's a core of what luxury brands must have. Paucity is the next one, and this is about scarcity, rareness. Hard to find, harder to come by, harder to attain. So it's got to have, and that's what somebody used the word exclusive, and sometimes it's this rarity or difficult to get hold of that can really give it that luxury and that exclusive element. If there was something that was just 10 a penny, you wouldn't feel as though you were getting something that was as luxury or as premium as it is. And the last one is persona. This is about a very, very unique culture and personality that is so personal and bespoke to that brand. So they are the cornerstones of a luxury brand. And if they don't have those four things, it's probably not going to have the ability to become and be sustained as that luxury brand. However, around that, there is a rather large layer of variables. And these are the other characteristics. Now, it's these variables that can be completely tangible, but also highly intangible as well. But again, all need to be taken into account when we're looking at the marketing of these brands. So if we look at these, and just in no particular order, so you would be expecting elements of a luxury brand to have confidence in the way it talks, confidence in the way it promotes itself, confidence in the way it speaks, confidence in the way it portrays itself. And again, the very careful element here is not for a brand not to cross over that line of confidence into arrogance, which is something that does need to be careful of. Exclusivity and prestige, already talked about that. Alternative options for luxury brands. I mean, you know, you could go out and buy Fairy Liquid. Let's use that as an example. How many alternatives have you got that you could buy? A lot? Not a lot? Loads. To go out and buy an Aston Martin, how many alternatives have you got? Yeah, so it's less. So again, so once you sort of get into these realms, the substitutes, the alternatives are less. Another characteristic is very much this essence, and we've talked about this almost with Hermes, using that as the example again. It's timeless, classic elegance. If you look at, I don't know, let's use Porsche cars for example, you will find that the style has over time, and the design, you can tell from then to now it's the same. They are fairly elegant in their design. They are timeless. They're quite classic. Watches, very much the same when you look at those. High quality, something I think that came out when I was asking some of the reasons why you put those particular brands that we showed into a category. So yeah, it will have very high quality, and that becomes an expectation of the people buying them. Luxury brands are normally also aspirational. Again, it's a completely subjective and totally intangible element. And they might be aspirational to some, but not to others. Pride of ownership. This is very often about somebody's own perception of self. So does having this item, does using this service, does going to this location make me have a better thought of myself? Does it make people think differently about me? So it's that pride of ownership element. Premium pricing, as I said, I've always suggested, but it's premium pricing that, I don't know if all of you have heard the expression of if you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it. And I think that's obviously sometimes where, when you're getting into these realms, that is very much the case. It's not a question you'd normally hear asked, or very often It's not even something that on a product you'd actually even see the price there. And experience, I think this is an incredibly important facet of luxury brand characteristics and marketing, because it is all about the experience. It's about what somebody wants to feel. It's about how they want to be treated. It's about how they want to be understood. It's about how they want to experience that product or service as well. Volume, we've already touched on. Luxury brands invariably, if you think about them, they invariably stir emotion. It might not be something you're interested in at all, but if it is, and they will normally stir some sort of emotion, whether that's a desire, whether it's looking at it thinking that looks beautiful, whether it's I'd like to have one of those one day, whether it might be that's extortionately overpriced, that's absolutely fine, but it's still a characteristic. Superior service, again, that sort of links in with experience. Custom made. It's something that we also get when we're looking at sort of this end of the sector. You wouldn't walk into Primark and say, I really like that top, but can I have it with red stitching, please, instead of white? Whereas you can obviously you've got that element as a customer of a luxury brand to be able to sort of really be quite bespoke in what you want and have things personalised to you. So it's unique and differentiated, but as I said, mainly one of the things that this is all about, it's about a lifestyle, and it's about the lifestyle that people want to choose. And so we have to bear in mind when marketing that we are marketing a lifestyle and a persona sometimes, not just the actual physical product of what it is. And one of the other things is just in terms of this, sometimes we have sort of looking at luxury brands about the here and now, but there is also the element that something that is a characteristic of these that isn't necessarily in a mass product is that people will often buy older items of these as an investment piece. And that's a whole separate marketing element that we won't go into, but actually incredibly important when portraying this. You can almost have something which you might be marketing now, or a product or a service, that actually in 20 or 30 years' time is going to be worth 10 times more, because of course it's creating the prestige and the allure around it. So, opportunities and challenges, because there are both in luxury brand marketing, the same as there are in mass consumer durable marketing. Now, I've not separated them out because you could argue that each one of these is both an opportunity and or a challenge. So we've already talked about this one, what is premium and what is luxury. And this is changing. It's definitely changed even in the last 5 to 10 years, globally and in this country. As I use the example of Audi, they used to be considered, that was it, a premium brand. Everybody aspired to it. Now it's actually fairly commonplace. So, increased affluence among sectors in the UK. I'm not sure, has anybody seen a programme or as a series of programmes that was on television recently called Super Rich? Yeah? What did you think of it? What do you think of the programme?
It's quite interesting, but I thought quite annoying people on there, I thought.
Okay.
A bit tedious.
Okay. But what has come out of that, as you say, it could be quite tedious. It's interesting to see those lifestyles. But what has come out just in the last 2 weeks of surveys, that we've now got 1% of, the world's richest 1% are now richer than the rest of the entire world's population put together. So when you actually think about that in those terms, and this is the first time that has ever been the case in the history of the economy, all of a sudden what we're talking about here takes on a whole new meaning. Because whilst we're calling these luxury brands, the divergence in the gap between us normal people and the super rich has divided even further. And we're now in a situation where luxury brands, which beforehand were the rarity, are in a position now where they are needed to become more the rule rather than the exception. And that is a huge challenge, but also a great opportunity as well for certain brands. Again, this is actually similar to what we did, the massification, a strange word, I know, but massification of premium and luxury. Again, I'll use cars as an example. Mercedes and Audi, they used to be the one that everybody aspired to have. Now, fairly commonplace. Even we would look, and it was an interesting thing when I joined Porsche, and I turned around and said to them, well, what is the main demographic? What do you consider to be the main profile of a target audience? And somebody turned around and said to me, male 40 plus earning over £100,000. And I was like, how have you arrived at that assumption? Oh, it's what Germany have said to us. Well, okay, but we're in the UK market, and also when you actually look at things these days, So you could have a bachelor who earns £60,000 and decides actually that his disposable income, he wants to spend it on a Porsche. That doesn't fall into the category. So again, we're having to be really careful these days of how we actually profile audiences and potential consumers, whether they're business or personal consumers, to our brand, because that might not be where you think it is. And so the profiling and insights of audiences really are key. Brand growth and diversification. Again, it's both an opportunity and a challenge, because any brand, you can't sit still. They do have to grow, and that invariably happens through either greater market penetration or diversification. The issue you've got with something like this is, how do you do that but without distilling the brand or the brand's identity or the user's sense of exclusivity? So that's something that needs to be weighed up. Retention is another area. We have said, in the luxury sector, there aren't as many choices as there might be in the fairy liquid sector. However, you still need to somehow retain those customers. And when you are talking about the types of things we're talking about, again, it comes back to service and experience. It is everything. They might love the product, but if they have a crap service, they're not going to be coming back. And so, again, it's about the entire thing all in one go. Brand equity. It's about moving some brands from premium to luxury, or as we've said, in this new sort of world of super rich. Where do we go from here? How do we make everything that is invested in that brand? How do we value that brand? And how are we going to value it going forward as the world progresses again over the next 10 years and as consumers progress again over the next 10 years and onwards? So remaining admired and aspired to, it is a huge challenge for some brands, because I think we used the word before, arrogance. You've got to be so careful that that pitch is right between keeping that product, service, location, whatever it might be, exclusive, accessible to all, accessible to just the few, but also making sure that it's not totally out of the reach that people look at the brand and think, oh, it's just arrogant, I can't be bothered with it. You want to make sure that people who can't necessarily afford it now, but might be able to in the future, still have that warm feeling about the brand as well. So the ethics of premium and luxury brands. I've actually got somebody I've been coaching on a dissertation about this actually, and this is what they've looked at, and it's a really interesting subject, but it is something that does have to be carefully considered. We've all heard in the past of where some of the most luxury brands have been producing items, but actually they find they've been doing it in a sweatshop in China. So why is that? We'll use the handbag again. Why is that handbag commanding £1,000? Why is that watch £17,000 when it's actually being made elsewhere? The ethics has become even more important, because particularly luxury brands can no longer get away. If we're saying that our history, pedigree, craftsmanship is all part of that brand and some of the building blocks and fundamentals, we've got to make sure that reality actually is the same as perception. So if we look at some of the negative elements of ethics, it could be that, as I said, the brand is looked at as opulent, decadent, excessive, or even potentially obscene or vulgar. It could be seen as materialistic, and those people that have it could also be lumped into these particular characteristics, that they're more interested in social status and vanity, exploitative, as we've said, but also just completely not essential to life. So why are we putting so much effort, and why are we bothering with these? On the positive side, however, things don't necessarily need to be vulgar just because they are excessive. They can be sophisticated. There's also the element that actually, luxury brands products can actually have they can represent a real genuine pursuit of excellence, whether it's in product quality, performance, but also pursuit of excellence in people to attain certain elements as well. And also they're there for helping people with their dreams, their aspirations, and I can't imagine there's anybody in this room that doesn't have something in their mind that says one day, I'd love to do that, I'd love to have that, I'd love to see that. And I think that is such an important part of society as well, just making sure that people's dreams, sort of are there, whether it's a product, service, or whatever. So in terms of last and taking us on to the next bit, so then the opportunity and the challenge is, using all this, what does the marketing comms mix actually look like, and how do we get this out there? So how are we marketing to them? Does anybody think that marketing of a luxury brand is the same or different as marketing in terms of mass consumer products? The promotional side of this now I'm talking. Different. How different do you think it is? Very? In some ways, it is poles apart. In other ways, the fundamentals remain the same, but it does take quite a different approach. So what we have to bear in mind is that, normally, and I do say normally here, and it's a generalisation, but normally, luxury brands, big premium brands, luxury brands, have immense high brand awareness already. So a lot of things that would normally have to do to build a brand, and I'll use an example. So I worked with in Formula One when Orange first launched in the UK. From a complete standing start to building a brand, which became one of the biggest brands in the UK, incredible hard work has to go into it. Very often that element isn't needed because the hard work has been done over time and over the heritage. But essentially they can fall into two areas. And the part where it is so different is in the sense that actually the retail space is what becomes one of the most important factors in luxury brand marketing, whereas it's probably less important if you're looking at Primark or Next or somewhere like that, okay? So we're going to split this into sort of two parts. You've also got your communications element and your retail space. But essentially, the element is, the fundamental is continuing to build and develop the buyer's perception of the brand consistently. It can't just say, right, we accept that this is the case and we know we're fantastic and we know that everybody knows about us, and leave it at that. It really is important that that is continued. This is quite a difference, is that the marketing comms should focus on the product and the craftsmanship. Doesn't necessarily use the word craftsmanship. That could be, in the case of a face cream, the fact that it's got whatever anti-age defying, exceptionally rare minerals in it. It's focusing on the product itself, not the benefit to the customer. Whereas normally, if you looked at other mass products, what they're focusing on is actually that benefit to the customer. So that's what should come across in the experience, but it is a fundamental difference. Of course, we're going to be looking at very much having common themes and feel that run through campaigns and comms. That's going to be the same whether we are mass or luxury, but those common themes and feel will just need to have very different touch points. It's also more important that you create incredibly high levels of personal engagement and connections. I'm sure you will have all heard throughout your marketing modules, whatever it is, customer engagement. It's not just about customer satisfaction anymore. But that level of engagement and personalisation, once you get into this realms of sort of the end of the market of luxury brands, is so much more important. And it comes on that less is more. So if we just look at some of these elements. So again, it's about integrated marketing comms, and this is where it's the same, whether no matter what you're working, you're going to be looking at an integrated marketing comms package. But you all know that you'll use advertising largely for getting mass awareness. You'll use different tactics depending what your desired outcome is for your particular promotional elements. You use most, but not necessarily all of them. So for example, you would never hear a luxury brand advertising on the radio, for example, whereas you would most other brands. So personal contact we've talked about. Design, again, this is probably one of the most important elements. It's what you can see, what you can look at, touch, feel. The colour, the texture. When you look at pieces of a luxury brand, you have an expectation that they are going to feel quality, they're going to exude allure and luxury. So design is even more important. Digital spaces, but rather than things pay-per-click, display advertising, Google AdWords, whatever it might be, and that type of, you're not going to be going there with that. You are, however, going to be looking at digital and looking at potentially having a presence on private member club websites. Yeah? Do you see where I'm going with that? So it's just about how you're looking at this space and gearing up what you're doing to make sure that you're hitting your target audience, but in this niche way and in a way which is probably a lot more subtle, is probably one of the best words. Advertising we've touched on, and as I said, it's going to be more niche, not mass. associations with like brands. So you will often see things like, we've already said that, so beverages is one of the sectors which tends to sort of fall into luxury characters. If we look at some champagne, so Bollinger, Veuve Clicquot, you probably wouldn't see them sponsoring table tennis. You would see them sponsoring polo, for example. So it's looking at those associations, but with like brands and like associations and alliances, which they themselves have the same type of demographics and audiences following them. Sponsorship. A lot of this, I don't know whether you still use the terms below the line and above the line, but a lot of this is some of the more below the line activities. Endorsement. How many brands can you think of, luxury brands, that have got some sort of endorsement from a film star, a TV personality, a sports personality? Name one. What was that? I can't hear, sorry. Bentley? And who? Okay.
The watchmaker and all the sports.
Yep. Or, you know, Amiga and Bond. It's one of the key ones. So the use of celebrity and personalities and those types of endorsements in luxury brand marketing is far over here than you'd normally see it in a normal mass branding as well. And the other one which is on here, which I would say actually in marketing of luxury brands is the most important, is ironically PR. Because this is the one where you are really setting the brand tone, creating the allure, creating the intrigue as well. And it has the ability to be sustained, and it's about anything which can sort of capture that imagination. You have the opportunity to do that a lot more across PR than you do sometimes across advertising. So really what we're saying here, it's about finding those really right content, the right channels to get to the profile of the audience that you've chosen. But there is no doubt that all research more recently states that where you have got higher engagement with a brand, emotional engagement with a brand, is where you've actually got a lot higher levels of repeat or purchase intent and retention as well. Is there anything in this that you've noticed is glaringly missed out? And there are two things which are normally absolute no-go areas for marketing within luxury brands. Any ideas what they might be?
Offers.
Sales promotions, absolutely. Complete no-go area. It devalues the brand. It also, and what do you think another one might be?
Newspaper or advertisement?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, newspaper advertisements, it's one of the areas which would be less preferential to. But the other thing which you'll never find is finance offers. So whether it's sales promotion, but finance offers. So both of those could either devalue the brand, but also the type of people that you're actually communicating with are probably not going to appreciate it anyway. They could perceive it as either being, well, hang on a minute, I don't need finance for this. They could either be offended by it, or alternatively think, well, hang on, if finance needs to be offered, then I've got people buying the same thing that I'm going to buy, and they can't afford it. So it changes the perception and their value. So two things that you will never see in luxury marketing, but you would see obviously in mass marketing as well. And of course, all of these elements combined with the core and the variable elements from 2 slides ago will combine together. But what we also can't miss off, and this is the same regardless, but increasingly important and even more so for luxury brands, because it can be sometimes very difficult to say what has generated, particularly as a lot of the things we've been talking about are more below the line, they are more subtle. It can be really difficult to say, well, what has actually generated that sale? What's generated that inquiry? And of course, from marketing, what we're here to do is generate sales opportunities, not sales, but sales opportunities. So it really is about finding those ways of setting KPIs, key performance indicators, whatever campaign it is, based, however, on your commercial objectives, and then putting in place some really strong monitoring tactics and tools to make sure that throughout the entire process we're looking at those. so that we can then evaluate everything we've done, because nothing should really be done, particularly when you're looking at this high sector, because you could argue that in more mass marketing, the cost per conversion, so let's say we spend £100 on marketing and we get 10 people, it's £10 per person. The cost in luxury brand marketing is extortionately more, and you could be looking £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 per person in terms of that conversion rate. So what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it becomes increasingly important. Not something that luxury brands have actually needed to necessarily do in the past, because even up until sort of market crashes in 2008, luxury brands seem to be a little bit set apart from market and economy. They're not anymore. Those things do affect. So again, hence the reason why these elements of measurement have become more important over the last few years. And of course, that gives us whether or not we've had return on investment from our activities. So in summary, luxury brand marketing, product excellence by itself isn't enough. As we've seen, it's about all those other elements. It must perform at an experiential level, and as consumers evolve, the brand needs to evolve with it. And we've also looked at the whilst pedigree and heritage factor is important, because it really does underpin the brand and its lineage. They've still got to make sure that over time that brand and the products, the services are still relevant and are dynamic, and that the persona of the brand continues as well. It can't just remain static. As I said, luxury brands must continue to maintain exclusivity and stature, but this has to be literally from the whole retail experience right through to communications and the touch points it associates itself with. I hope that it has been a whistle-stop tour, really, of luxury brand marketing, as I said, based on a number of assumptions of where you know anyway in your marketing and brand knowledge. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have any questions, please, I'm going to be around for the next sort of half an hour or so please do come and ask. But thank you for your time.